Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar, How to Assess Your Team's Calls. My name is Stephanie Kurowski and I am a Senior Business Advisor here at CallSource. We're also joined by Nicole Mirabelli, a fellow Senior Advisor.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for joining us today.
So as a reminder, this webinar will be recorded and available for you to view at a future time. Also, if you haven't already done so, please call in so that you can participate in our discussion at the end. The ability to make a personal connection on the phone is crucial in your conversations with prospective patients. Recording your team's calls and reviewing them on a regular basis is an opportunity to understand where your office is at when it comes to engaging patients. With CallSource, you have unlimited access to your call recordings, allowing you to have the fingers on the pulse of the patient experience. Today, we will review how to utilize CallSource resources to review your team's calls, the importance of creating a culture of listening in your office, and steps to assessing your team's calls. Now, before we get started, I do want to get an understanding of how many of you are currently reviewing calls with your team. So in just a moment, you'll see a poll in front of you. Please note that your individual responses will remain anonymous, but we'll review the total results at the end. All right, so let's go ahead and see what the results are. So as you can see, the majority of you guys are currently reviewing calls with your team. It's just most of you not on a consistent basis. So today's webinar is going to be really helpful for you guys to start implementing this process amongst your team so that you guys can review phone calls to build a top performing team. Reviewing your calls with your team is important to not only see where their strengths and weaknesses are, but it provides you with a roadmap of how to improve your team's efforts. With recorded calls, you get insight into their actual day-to-day performance that you can use to show real-life examples, rather than hypothetical examples that may not resonate with your team. You already have the calls recorded, so take advantage of this resource to help grow your team's performance. By reviewing your team's calls on a regular basis, you also show your team that how they handle calls is important and that their performance does matter to you. This will encourage your team to strive for continuous improvement. Preparation for listening to calls in your office starts with the culture that you establish in your office. You want to establish an environment where listening to calls is seen as a tool to help the office improve, as opposed to something seen as a negative, a reprimand, or a way to single out any one person. And this begins with how you communicate assessing their calls with the team and how you review calls with the individuals. As a manager or an owner, you are the team's coach. The role of the coach is to create a winning team, and a winning team is one that consistently turns in a winning performance. This will not happen by accident or luck alone. The coach must help each team member to understand exactly what is expected of them, and then the team member must understand how their performance compares to those expectations. Some coaches find it difficult to be honest with their employees about their performance, so they end up settling for mediocrity in an effort to avoid confrontation. However, this does not benefit anyone. Honest feedback is essential to building a top-performing team. When it comes to listening to calls in your office, knowing your audience is imperative. So if your team is not comfortable listening to themselves, they may find it difficult to be reviewing their calls for improvement. They may end up just focusing on how they sound rather than what they are saying. So ask yourself this: is your team comfortable listening to themselves on the phone? If not, then start slow. Have each person listen to themselves in a quiet place for 20 to 30 minutes a week. This will allow them to become comfortable with how they sound on the phone, and they will begin to start focusing on how they are handling those inbound calls. Now, if your team is comfortable listening to their calls, you can create that environment of learning as a group much sooner. So as the coach, you should know your team's performance. Reviewing their calls on a regular basis is part of this. Accessing your prospect calls on your CallSource reports will guide you to the calls that you decide to review with your team. Now, reviewing your missed opportunities will provide you the calls with the greatest learning opportunities, and you should review these calls most frequently. However, listening to calls that were booked into an appointment will give you insight into what each person is doing well. Use these calls as positive examples and to call out team members for recognition. Once you have decided which calls to review, listen to the call and fill out the call listening form. You can find a copy of the call listening form in the handout section of this webinar. First, you want to determine what you liked about the call when you're reviewing the audio recording. You will want to use these for encouragement with your team. Then you want to identify a maximum of 3 areas for improvement. Any more than 3 will overwhelm any person. Focusing on a few items at a time will allow them to put their energy into these specific items and achieve success. So some examples of what you do want to be listening for are, did that person ask for the appointment? Did they build value and rapport? Did they empathize with the patient? These are just a few items that you can track and review when reviewing your phone calls, and you can track and monitor the progress from your CallSource telephone performance analysis report. And you can reach out to your dedicated CallSource rep if you have any questions on how to access this report or read it in further detail. Once you determine what areas that you want to focus on, you want to outline steps for improvement. So for example, if no value is given on that conversation, you may want to have that individual come up with 3 to 4 of their own value propositions to use on the phone. And after you have outlined those steps for improvement, you want to develop encouraging and positive statements to use during your one-on-one sessions with that person. This will help build a positive environment of trust. So we will be going into detail on assessing your team's calls on a one-on-one basis as well as on a team level. But first, I wanted to let Nicole provide you tips that she has found successful when conducting these meetings.
Thank you, Stephanie. The objective of reviewing calls is to acknowledge your team's efforts and improve areas to achieve higher results. So when meeting with your team, you first want to set the atmosphere. Make sure you focus your attention on the person you are coaching. You do not want to allow for any distractions or accept phone calls during these meetings. The meetings should take place in a quiet, safe environment, such as a conference room or an office. This will ensure you can give your employee your full attention. You want to make sure you are communicating that you are invested in your employee and their personal and professional development. Next, you want to explain the process. By communicating your intentions, the team members will know exactly what constitutes success, and strong performers will benefit as their efforts will stand out and be recognized. Be sure to explain that you will be providing feedback on the call and the experience the employee created. Clearly state your focus at the beginning of the session to allow the employee to concentrate on that skill while listening to the call playback. It can be easy to get caught up in everything that we could have done better. And as Stephanie said, by focusing on a couple areas of improvement, you can keep on track of the goal and not be overwhelmed. Then you want to make sure you listen. After you stop the phone call, sit back and listen to what the employee heard first. This is the time to learn what your employee believes should be improved. In stating what they would like to work on, the employee becomes accountable. Next, you want to acknowledge the employee's efforts and let them know you heard all that they had to say. Also, be sure to restate the employee's feedback to ensure you understood them correctly and there is no misunderstandings about expectations moving forward. Then make sure you're asking open-ended questions that allow the employee to state the expectation, how the skill is achieved, and why it is important to the patient relationship. For example, if you're focusing on empathy, how is this skill achieved? Can an employee learn to give empathy when speaking to patients? One tip is to have them imagine they were speaking to a friend or family member. We are much more empathetic to people we know, and it can be more difficult to express empathy to a stranger on the phone. especially during a busy season when we're taking many phone calls in a row. However, if you have your team imagine they are speaking to a loved one, empathy will be achieved easier. Once you discuss how to achieve this skill, review why empathy is important to the patient relationship. Expressing empathy allows you to better understand the patients, as well as allow the patients to be much more comfortable with you. Now, if you find the employee is struggling to meet a goal, continue to ask questions to understand why they are still struggling with the same goal as the last time. Follow-up is going to be an important part of this process. You don't want to see the employees take your advice as just a new directive where call listening is not going to be important because you're not going to follow up on the progress. Once the goal has been achieved, set a new goal. The goal should reflect your original focus to ensure the overall objective was reached. And as always, ask how they intend to reach their goal and outline action steps to achieve the goal. And then finally, make sure your tone is upbeat and positive throughout the session. These meetings should be collaborative, not confrontational. Session is going to be valuable to both the employee and the coach, and using these tips will ensure that both of you find success and meet your goals.
Thank you, Nicole. These are some really helpful tips, and I'm sure that you guys can start utilizing these if you aren't currently utilizing them when you are reviewing calls with your team. So as your team becomes more comfortable reviewing their phone calls and listening to themselves, you have determined which calls you want to review with an individual, you can actually begin conducting one-on-ones with each person in the office. Before your one-on-one, send that call to the individual and ask them to fill out the call listening form as well. Have them set aside 20 to 30 minutes a week to review their calls on an ongoing basis. Once the individual has reviewed their calls, then you want to listen to the call together. Have them determine what they liked about the call. These are those positives and will encourage that person to keep up the good work. Next, have them identify those areas of improvement. When reviewing calls with an individual, have the employee tell you their feedback first and then discuss with them your thoughts. Having them give their feedback first allows you to hear their honest interpretation of their performance without your thoughts affecting their answers. Knowing where the team thinks they are in their performance will help you coach them and fill in any gaps that they may not be aware of or that they may have missed. After the employee gives you their feedback, discuss what you liked about the call and what behaviors you want them to continue doing. Remember, this is creating an environment of trust and a safe environment in reviewing calls together. Then discuss areas of improvement that you previously selected, again, no more than 3, and review and outline steps for improvement. It is important to give timelines when outlining improvement. When should they meet this improvement goal? How will you know it's been accomplished? As mentioned before, if you're utilizing the telephone performance analysis report, you can track and monitor the individual's progress via that report. Once a culture of listening has been established in your office and people are comfortable listening to their calls on their own as well as their calls with you, you can begin to review calls as a group. Have each person partner up and analyze each other's calls. These groups should meet twice a month to review calls together. You may want to avoid having individuals choose their partners. You know your team best. You know their individual strengths and weaknesses. Pairing individuals with certain strengths can be beneficial. Others can learn and feed off of these strengths. Remember, these exercises are not meant to be busy work. It is to help your team grow, learn, and develop their phone skills. As your team starts to become comfortable reviewing calls with their partners, you can start setting aside some time during your staff meetings to listen to these recorded calls as a group. Have the entire team listen to the call together. If you are only listening to 1 or 2 calls during each team meeting, make sure that you are rotating so that everybody has a chance to have their calls played. And when you do review calls during meetings, you can listen to entire calls or portions of multiple calls. This is all going to be dependent on what's best for your team and what works best with your team meetings. Once you have played the call, have each person say what they liked about the call first. This is crucial in creating trust amongst the team. Our instincts are to start with the bad, but this could cause discomfort and a lack of trust amongst the team. Since the group will be critiquing an individual's calls, it is important that people are not made to feel that they are being picked on. After everyone has stated what they liked about the call, have the team discuss those areas of improvement, and then you can discuss how the team can get better in those areas. Set those expectations for the entire team, and then establish those action steps to achieve those expectations. While you may be only reviewing 1 or 2 individuals' phone calls during team meetings, the benefit of reviewing calls as a team will allow everybody to be able to learn from other people's experiences. If somebody's struggling in one area, it is a guarantee that other people are probably struggling in that area, or they may have encountered a similar experience or will in the future, and now they can be prepared. Ultimately, your goal is to not just improve an individual's performance, but improve your team as a whole. So thank you everyone for attending our webinar. I hope that you have taken away some useful tips and tools on assessing your team's calls. If you would like to discuss these items in further detail, please reach out to your dedicated CallSource representative. Also, if you would like more resources to develop your team's skills, CallSource offers a coaching program. Please reach out to your account representative if you would like more information on this service. Now at this time, I'd like to open it up for any questions. So please feel free to type in any questions that you have in the question box, or if you'd like, you can raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can ask your question directly.
Stephanie, I did think of something as you were speaking. One common question that I hear from my clients is what to do if they are having difficulty creating that culture of call listening within their office. So in your experience, what do you recommend that they do in order to achieve that call listening culture within the office?
That is a great question, because creating that culture of listening in the office is so crucial to being able to move forward with this whole process. One of the things that you can do to try and establish that culture is if you have your own phone calls recorded in the system, begin by playing your calls to the team. This way, it will make them more at ease when reviewing their phone calls. They know that they're not in trouble, that other people struggle in areas, and that ultimately this is a team effort and they're not being singled out.
Thank you very much, Stephanie.
Yeah, of course. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to either type them in or raise your hand. Okay, so it looks like we did get one question in the question box. This question comes from Elizabeth, and she has asked, how often should I be reviewing calls? That is a really good question. So as I mentioned throughout this presentation, that you can set aside time during your once a week for the individuals or maybe during your team meetings. Most importantly, as an owner or a manager, you should be reviewing your team's calls most frequently. So I would recommend that you review them once a week. And the reason why I say that is you don't want to wait till the end of the month and come across a phone call that was mishandled and bring it to that individual's attention then. If you're reviewing calls on a weekly basis and you notice that an individual maybe mishandled a phone call, you can address it at that time while it's fresh in their mind. And as you're reviewing calls weekly, feel free to send those phone calls to that individual. Now, you don't have to meet with the individuals to do a one-on-one once a week, but the more frequently they're reviewing their phone calls on their own, the more comfortable they're going to become with the whole process. And then at that point, whatever works for you, whether you meet with the individuals for one-on-ones once a week or maybe twice a month, and if you're already establishing monthly team meetings, then just go ahead and incorporate the call listening into those team meetings. All right, so it doesn't look like there's any more questions at this time, But I do want to thank everybody again for joining us, and please look out for information for our upcoming webinar, Preparing for a Peak Season. Thanks and have a great day.